Jack.
Levi.
The Book Club from Hell.
So I'm really happy today to have Lewis Woolston on the show, the author of Remembering the Dead and The Last Free Man, the two short story collections. Have you published anything else? I couldn't find other things.
I've had a few little things published in Minimag.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Shout out to Minimag.
Shout out to Minimag, top bloke. And just one or two other things in little places. But yeah, currently working on a third book. Should be out soon. Yeah, hopefully. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, that was exactly what I was going to ask you next. Do you have any new projects you're working on? So I recall you were having a bit of trouble finding a place to get it published or getting it out.
Yeah, it's just been a few delays and things.
Yeah.
That's all. Yeah, these things happen.
Yeah,
it's life.
Bonfire Books. If any of you are listening, got a very, very good Australian author here on the show. Yeah, so Remembering the Dead is a really, really Australian collection of stories. That was one of the things that really struck me reading it. Even just the front cover, if people are watching, it looks extremely Australian.
That's actually Fremantle.
Yeah. Are you from Fremantle or nearby?
I grew up in WA. I grew up out in the country, a shithole of a town called Geraldton. Moved to the city basically as soon as I could. And yeah, I did live in Fremantle for a number of years. That photo, I took that with a disposable film camera. I don't know if you're old enough to remember them. In about 2002 or thereabouts. So yeah, we ended up just using that for the cover. Yeah,
but the collection is extremely Australian, and it's not the overseas view of Australia is just full of 6'3" blonde surfers. The characters in it, they're just very ordinary. It's not like they're not boring or dull, but they're not exceptional. They're not exceptionally bad. They're not exceptionally good. They're just very normal Australians doing things that, there are more gnarly bits about Narcotics Anonymous, but for the most part, doing things that most Australians will recognise. So if people are interested in getting an insight into what Australia is beyond shit posting and Steve Irwin, this book's a good one. So, how did you actually first start writing? Because you've mentioned a few times in this book that a few people told you were good telling stories. Is that how you began?
I was always the bullshitter that told yarns, and especially like at work at the Smoko Shed and things like that. So I sort of always had the inkling, and I was always a reader, so I always had the thought, one day I should try to write a book. I guess how I started writing, I hit my 30s and got depressed is the simplest explanation.
That's a very common path.
Yes. Basically, I hit 32, and I've actually told the story before to someone, I think. But anyway, I hit 32 and realised I wasn't any better off than I'd been at 22 and got a bit depressed and decided just fuck it. And I sort of went out bush and went living and working remote and just decided I'm just going to please myself, to hell with society and everything. And part of that was I thought, well, I'll start writing. And I did. I tried writing genre fiction and things, but I wasn't any good at it. I just don't have the knack, which is probably a pity because that makes more money. But how I got my sort of, I guess you call it my break, I've been reading Somerset Maugham. I don't know if you know him at all. Have you ever read him?
I've never read it. My dad is obsessed with him. And I think just as a bratty teenager, I thought no, I'm not going to read that. Because I was told by my parents to read it over and over again. Sounds like he's a wonderful writer, and I've just been cutting off my nose to spite my face.
Yeah, his short stories in particular, I read them, and he used to travel around in what was back then the British Empire, and he'd find these odd people in out of the way places, like someone running a rubber plantation in colonial Malaya, or someone working on the docks in colonial Singapore, or things like that. and he just had this eye for people's lives, and he'd write a short story about it, and they were fantastic. And I was living and working out in the Nullarbor at Roadhouse at the time, and it just popped into my head one day, hey, this is kind of like his thing. And then it just, hey, I could write short stories, and just went click in my brain, and that's how the first book happened. And yeah, went from there.
Yeah, because you write with what I think of as a very particular style. Maybe it is just W. Somerset Maugham, whom I haven't read, but it's very, very conversational, very, very straight. Like there's not a lot of weird punctuation, not a lot of self-consciously large words. Really conversational. It feels like you're being told this story by someone you know really, really well, or by some stranger you just met at a pub. And there's little vertical slices of life. Quite often, it's just going to be a situation, that two people in a room arguing with each other, or sometimes an overview of someone's entire life, but as recounted by someone who knew that person well. And so, have you tried? So you said you tried genre fiction, and it didn't work. Have you tried writing things other than genre fiction? And these, I don't even know what you call them, like little vignettes, because they're shorter than most short stories as well. Some of these are super short and really evocative.
Yeah, there was some longer ones in the first book, and there'll be one or two longer ones in the next book. But yeah, that particular book was very quick and punchy. Because I wrote most of those short stories when my daughter was a baby, so I didn't have huge chunks of time. So it was all kind of get it out, punchy. But that's still sort of, I guess, my style. Sort of meat and potatoes, prose. That's probably me making a virtue out of a necessity, because I don't have much formal education. So even if I wanted to write like David Foster Wallace, I don't think I probably could.
I feel like, though, like with him, he can get away with it. I don't think anyone else actually can get away with writing something that obnoxious. I'm an Infinite Jest appreciator, but it's such an obnoxious book. Remembering the Dead is great because it's so unpretentious. It's not full of itself at all.
Yeah. That's just, I guess, the style I've stumbled into by sort of necessity, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. Have you tried cultivating the style at all, or is this just what comes out when you write?
This is mostly just what comes out. I did try sort of. There are a couple of experiments with like stream of consciousness. I quite liked Virginia Woolf back in the day. Mm-hmm. It sort of didn't work for me, and particularly with the subject matter, like sort of working class white trash Australians. It doesn't kind of work. It kind of has to be meat and potatoes. So it's this sort of the perfect tool for the perfect job, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. You were saying you came across it out of necessity, but if you find a niche, like if you find a sort of the right job for the tool you have, then
absolutely,
it works. And
it works, yeah.
Writing in a stream of consciousness, like, I don't know, maybe someone could. It feels like that could get derailed pretty easily. That could just explode.
Yeah, with the subject matter, I don't think it'd quite work.
It might even feel like you were taking the piss if you were trying to talk about like blue collar Australians, with really, really, really lofty, self-consciously academic prose. It might come off as a joke, whereas these stories feel very sincere. There's a real honesty to them, which I really liked. I really, really liked this collection.
Jeez.
And so, when you actually came to setting out the order of these stories, are they programmed in a particular way? Did you really think about the order? Because there are certain things like those 3 Remembering the Dead stories, where you write about a person's life, a person whom you've known and who's died, and they really feel like the beating heart of this collection. Those are the ones that are really emotionally resonant.
Yeah, they were written first.
Mm.
Those are barely even fiction.
Mm.
You could almost call them straight biography, almost. What happened that in the Justin Moriarty story? It says to sort of let's tell it out. After my daughter was born, because I got married and had a kid quite late in life, and I didn't really expect it to happen, and then I sort of had, when your first child's born, you have this sort of 6 months of absolute golden happiness, and it's really great, and my brain just goes, well, why is this happening? What's the meaning of all this? And I got to thinking about all the things I've done through my life, and what that led up to it, and what did all that mean? What was it all for? Just the brain going in circles, I guess, to a certain extent. And I started wondering where people were, and I thought, maybe I should try Googling them. And I thought, well, maybe they'll be on some form of social media or in a local newspaper for something, or something like that. And the first person I tried Googling was this Justin Moriarty, and the first thing I found was his grave on this family history resource website, a Billion Graves Record, I think it was called. I've never heard of it before or since, and he died back in 2010, and I was like, wow, okay, right. And I felt like this real responsibility, I guess you'd say, to tell these stories. I don't know, the friendships you have when you're young, I'm speaking for myself here, but when you're young and an idiot doing drugs, those friendships are really, really intense, even though you are young idiots on drugs. Like they're really emotionally intense relationships. We had really meaningful, deep conversations, and it really mattered. And most of those people that I knew back then are probably dead, and there's probably hardly anyone who even remembers them. In some cases, like their parents would have been probably my age back then, so there's a good chance they're dead. So in some cases, I'm probably the only person alive who remembers them. And then when I die, what happens then? It's as though they never existed. And that thought really bothered me. And also, I guess, the contrast, because as you get older, it's like the friendships just are not intense. The relationships, the experiences aren't as intense. And you kind of wonder, well, is it really... It's just not as meaningful, and you look back with fondness of a time that objectively was quite horrible. I mean, we were young idiots on drugs. Life was not actually good. But it seems that in comparison, my social life now is pretty lame. My daughter gets invited to birthday parties with the other kids, and I end up standing around the barbecue with the other dads, Yeah, right, how about that sports ball team? Yeah. It's just like, I gave up drugs for this shit. Seriously. But, there was a sort of nostalgia, when I wrote those, on the one hand, I was really happy because, I started a family and all that. And on the other hand, there was this really quite intense nostalgia for a time when I was a fucking wastrel, really. So it was, so that was sort of the thought behind that, I guess, yeah.
Yeah, I really did get that impression that overall the theme of these stories was sort of someone from a place of stability, or relative stability, looking backwards.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And it's really bittersweet, because it's sort of hard to tell how much of this is just straight autobiography and how much is fiction. There are a bunch of places where it really does feel like it's just you telling me something on the page.
There's a lot of blurring, yeah.
Yeah, it really does feel like I'm married, I've got a kid, I'm in a good place now, let's look back. And it's bittersweet. It's not...
Yeah.
It's not, my early life was hell, or maybe, it was bad, but there are things I miss.
Yeah.
Were all of these stories written as reminiscences on things that have happened to you in life?
I'm the sort of writer, I pretty heavily mine my own life. I don't really make much up, which is probably why I was no good at genre fiction. I can't just make up a Westeros or a Middle Earth or anything. I don't have the knack. So I do heavily mine my own life. And yeah, there's a lot of blurring between biography and fiction. It's paper-thin boundary at sometimes. But, a lot of it, basically I tend to just take something real that happened to me or an experience I had or something and then just run with it. And I don't let the truth get in the way of a good yarn, but, at the same time, it's rooted in something true.
Yeah, and that also, it's interesting you talking about not being able to write genre fiction, because one of the things that I find really defines good genre fiction, or at least genre fiction that I like, is this sense of movement. Like, a lot of it moves really quickly, and the genre stories that I've enjoyed tend to just haul ass. They're really, really moving along. Whereas your stories have this sense of, this crystalline stillness. Even when things are happening, they're very, very still, and it does feel like someone, I don't know, sitting in a quiet room now that things have fallen into place, and looking back on these memories that aren't threatening them to the
not anymore
quite as much anymore. Yeah. So
it's actually fairly accurate. Yeah.
You talking about the genre fiction, it makes a lot of sense now. That particular style of writing, wouldn't work at all. In genre fiction, to get boring. With these sort of stories, though, and this form, it really works. So, I guess you've found what works with your particular style.
I found my niche.
Yeah. Look, I mean, other people can't do it, so just keep hammering that. It is a... So I had Adam Luce Reinspect on, of mixtape Hyperborea fame, pretty recently. And it's interesting contrasting how you and how he writes. Also, shout out to mixtape Hyperborea. For those listening who haven't read it, I really, really recommend it. But that to me is it's a young person's novel, or a young man's novel. Like, it's obviously written by someone who's young.
A young man, yeah.
Whereas Remembering the Dead it only really could have been written by someone who's lived beyond their 20s. And one of the main things is, so in Mixtape, there's this sense of an endless horizon and of possibility. And what you were talking about, those intense young friendships, and I'm... I don't like to think of myself as old, but I'm in my early 30s now. Like, I have to accept I'm not 22 anymore. And so I think I'm in that process you're talking about, where you do lose some sense of intensity and immediacy.
Yeah.
It seems almost those young friendships, there's a simple intensity. Even if you're in a terrible situation or some complicated situation, those friendships always retain some simplicity. Maybe if you haven't lived long enough to have enough regrets or sorrows, it might be easier to have that sort of really, really intense, straightforward friendship. And that straightforward intensity is, Mixtape is full of that. That's part of what makes the book so much fun and so engaging. Whereas Remembering the Dead has the stillness and some sense of regret that only really comes with age. And anyone who's lived long enough is going to have regret when you finally, when you get hit with the realization that you've probably made some bad decisions that you can't take back. Yeah. And then the even deeper realization that even if you're making consistently great decisions, such is life, that you're probably going to miss out on things anyway because you can't do everything. Like you're always going to miss out. And Remembering the Dead it's really full of that. So some characters will say it explicitly. So this book is full of people who've been on drugs. I don't know what sort of drugs, but it's Narcotics Anonymous, so probably a lot of heroin or something similar.
Yeah, it was late 90s, so the big heroin wave in Australia. Yeah.
Yeah, so a lot of people saying I've wasted 20 years of my life on this stuff, and there's that
Yeah.
very intense sense of regret. But then there are softer moments that it's not looking back in, with such intense regret. But say that first story of someone, it sounds like someone talking to their kid, and just
Yeah.
remembering the trees out the front of their house and thinking about them, and having that sense of past time, which I think you always look on with a bit of, with some sense of bitterness in with the sweetness, because that's time past and time closer to dying.
Yeah.
That's a part of this book that I really, really like. Like it's very intense. I suppose the book is called Remembering the Dead, so
Yeah.
it's not completely surprising, but that aspect of memory and aging and looking back was so intense. It's a bit of a shame you didn't write stuff when you were a teenager or in your 20s to see if that changes, or whether that's just Lewis Woolston. It's like you're always like that.
No, I don't. I think you write from where you're at the moment. Like, I'd be interested to see the mixtape Hyperborea guy, if he writes another book, say in 20 years.
Yeah, when he's 50, see what happens.
Yeah, what's he? He might take an entirely different angle. Yeah, so I think you do write from where you're at to some extent. Yeah,
and read from where you're at. So when I chatted to him, I felt that the book was a lot of it was about nostalgia, or that's how I felt it to be. And he said, "No, not really. I didn't write it with that in mind." And I found that really interesting. That I guess we're at fairly different stages of life and read it very, very differently. Is your focus of writing changing as you're getting older? I guess so. Remember that it's from 2022.
yeah,
Yeah, and Last Free Man was that 2020?
2019. Yeah,
2019. Okay, yeah. So they're pretty close together. But has your focus been shifting as you've been getting older? Or is it hard to say?
I seem to
so
find
close together.
Yeah, I seem to find different themes. I mean, the Last Free Man was all about the roadhouse life and those experiences. Remembering the Dead came from becoming a father and that, and then looking back on young life. The stuff I've got coming out now, I've actually tackled, like growing up in fundamentalist Christianity and all that sort of thing, which I don't know, just felt like time to talk about that, I guess. But I don't think my actual style or themes... Yeah, I don't think my style is changing that much. I've sort of... I suppose I've sort of learnt what sort of works and what doesn't for me, but... Yeah, each book has a sort of more or less a theme, but yeah, it's... I think my style is my style. That's just what I am. That's what I am.
Yeah, it's not going to be changing. The fundamentalist Christianity part is interesting. I'm looking forward to reading that, because you hinted at it in this book of wanting to get away from WA. But this book seemed more about your illustrious military career and Narcotics Anonymous.
Yeah. The two things I say I regret in life: joining the army and doing drugs. And at least drugs were fun to start with. You know?
Yes. What? So your stories of being in the army, are those more or less autobiographical here?
Well, I sort of had to be careful to not get sued. So I've changed a lot of details and times and names and things, obviously. I don't know if you know this, but when you leave the army, they make you sign a bunch of stuff. And yeah, you actually have to get permission to write. So all those guys that write memoirs about their experience in Afghanistan, they had to get permission to do that. And yeah.
Oh shit! So
and you can't leave until you sign the thing. So they've got you over a barrel. Yeah.
Right. I mean, you made the military sound like a blast. So they'll be handing this out at recruiting stations.
Yeah, don't, kids, just don't.
It is something that I did hear about the military, that it's more intensely boring than you can possibly imagine most of the time. And this this book confirmed my meager experience with what it is to be in the army. I heard that the worst is when you're in or near a combat zone, and it's 99.9% intense boredom, then 0.1% sheer terror. Someone's trying to kill me.
Yeah, and if if you're stuck in Australia and you're at a base somewhere in Australia, it is just routine and boredom and petty stupidity, petty sadism of your superiors, and there you go. And not much you can do about it.
Were you writing at that point, or just doing a lot of reading and collecting material that would later on become part of your writing career?
I mean, I've always been a reader since I was a kid, and I've always sort of thought in the back of my mind, hey, I should give this a go, but I didn't seriously start until I was about 32. So But as it turns out, all these things, all the shitty jobs and various experiences, all turned out to be raw material. Which is probably the good thing about being a writer. Everything just becomes raw material, and
yeah. All of what you thought at the time was wasted time. I guess it probably was to a large extent wasted time. Yeah. At least like sitting around doing smack. Yeah, that really does seem to be a theme of Remembering the Dead, though. Wasted time.
Yeah, absolutely.
So one thing that does come up a lot in it is addiction, which is just this black hole of time, this engine of regret. And Narcotics Anonymous, in these stories, does seem to be this point of stability. So you mentioned getting... I don't know if you were disillusioned with it or you just felt it outlived its usefulness, but getting over it eventually. But you also mentioned that, at least for the characters in the stories, not Lewis Woolston... It was you took it really, really seriously, and it was this stabilizing force. And a lot of this book does seem to be based around these unstable situations and then finding some little island of stability.
Yeah.
What is the process in Narcotics Anonymous, and what is it that gives that stability? Because, I know people who've been in AA. I don't know people who've been in NA, or at least haven't told me they've been in NA.
So this is just my experience for what it's worth. I'm not a professional or anything. But the getting off the drugs is actually the easy bit. The hard bit is then that you've got a fucking vacuum. Because when you're doing drugs, it is your whole life. And probably the same with alcohol if you're a serious alcoholic too. It's just your whole life, and you need to fill it with something else, something a bit positive and constructive and useful. And you also kind of need to do something about the head demon, demons in your head that got you there in the first place. So to me, that's what Narcotics Anonymous did. Here's this, you go to these little meetings and you make all these friends of people who are off drugs and getting off drugs, and there's sort of all this positivity and helpfulness, and that is actually really good. And it's a bit more, you're certainly any day of the week better off going to meetings than doing drugs. And it fills you with something positive instead. It fills the vacuum with something positive and constructive, and sort of gives you a few tools and things. There was a bit of disillusionment after a few years. It was just like, can we move on to the next stage kind of thing of life? And I really don't like the whole therapy culture. So, sitting around talking about my feelings doesn't wash after a certain point. But look, I don't want to badmouth it too much. It was just like, well, it absolutely served its purpose and it did good. So, if I knew someone currently who was in addiction, I would definitely recommend it. But I just, beyond a certain point, it outlived its usefulness for me. Yeah.
I didn't get the impression that you felt it was a waste of time. So, say when it comes to the military, or something. Like you're pretty straight with nah, this was just not a good idea, didn't help me. Whereas with NA, it felt more like you're at a different stage in your life where it didn't help you anymore.
Yeah, basically.
Which I guess is probably the point.
Sort of, yeah. Well, and I mean, yeah, sometimes you outgrow things, so it happens in life. Yeah, but yeah, the military was a complete waste of time.
You do. I mean, if it says anything about the I don't know, the creative fertility of different organisations, you didn't really write about soldiers you'd met in the military and remembering the dead beyond, just offhand comments about someone you met while you were following yourself in a particular story, versus all of the different character sketches you do of people you've met through NA or through doing drugs. There's maybe I wonder what it is about that particular type of misery that leads to people you find interesting rather than military misery that you just seem to find less interesting.
Well, because anyone who actually fits in well with the military and does okay with it is a really fucking boring person. Like, is really lacks. If you completely lack individuality and just want to merge into like some sort of Borg cube thing, merge your soul and sense of self into the Borg cube, then you'll do fine in the military. But whereas see the people who end up in Narcotics Anonymous and doing drugs and things do tend to be misfits and oddballs and damaged people, and obviously they're more interesting in terms of literature. Yeah. I guess it makes a lot of sense because the it's like why there are no great novels written about insurance companies. As far as I know, no one's written a great book about working in an insurance company. Because it's fucking boring, and the people that do it well are boring.
Somewhat related, because we were talking about David Foster Wallace earlier. Is that The Pale King was set in the IRS. I mean, granted, he did kill himself while writing it, so yeah. But there are probably certain types of misery that are easier to mine for an interesting story or an interesting piece of art.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and I did get that impression when you were in all of the stories, or whenever you referenced the military, it did feel like this. Each person was part of the scenery almost, a talking part of the scenery, one that was pushing back on you, or making you walk around, or do guard duty, or punishing you for doing something you should have been doing. But they don't have the same apparent sense of agency as the NA people you talk about. Self-destructive agency, plenty of the time.
But agency nonetheless.
But, they made the wrong decisions, but they were still making decisions.
Yeah. Whereas you sort of become an automaton in the military. Yeah.
One thing that came up quite a lot too was family and having kids, which is nice because I'm at that stage of my life now. I've got a new family, so those parts really resonated. A lot of bits of, say, someone talking to I think it's almost always their daughter, which it's very autobiographical. Yeah. And that was that really, really worked for me because there's this real sense of gratitude and gratefulness because you've got these stories of family life, and it might not always be perfect, but it feels very, very meaningful. And this will be contrasted with stories about someone who's just fucked up their entire life by doing drugs and then dying on the street. Did you?
Yeah.
Were you intentionally writing to contrast all of these things, to put the stories of a totally wasted life next to a life where someone's really, really found something worth sticking around for, or is this more a function of just what you find salient? Those things go together.
It was sort of the thinking process of where I was at the time, because I just when I wrote this, I had a newborn. Or toddler, newborn, and so there was, and I really still enjoy being a father, and I enjoy being married. I think it's great. Never would want to go back to dating nowadays. But and having this joy in the family life, and then at the same time, because of the way my brain works, I was thinking a lot about back in the day and these people, most of whom were dead, and and the thought of, well, why did I survive it all and get through it? There's a certain amount of survivor's guilt at the time that I was writing this. I was thinking about it. And you can't help the contrast. As I was thinking about it, there was, I knew people that just had amounted to nothing, and then here I was with all this happiness and joy in my life, and it's I couldn't help the contrast. There was when back in those days when I was doing drugs, all the people in Perth that were doing drugs, there used to be a belief, it was I suppose a sort of urban myth, that if you died, like you overdosed somewhere and they couldn't find your ID or whatever and find family, they would give your body to the medical students at UWA to practice, the dissection and all that shit. I don't know if that's true, but we all believed it at the time. And the thought of that always bothered me. And so I guess kind of the thought of someone, dying, overdosing in a public toilet somewhere and being found and being given to the medical students at UWA, and versus, having a family and having meaning and love and I couldn't help but sort of write about that. What do you call it? Contrast, I guess. Yeah, it just came out. Yeah, it wasn't actually very thought about at all. It just sort of came out.
I guess, I mean, it obviously it does follow a logic. It's you might not have been completely aware of it or intentionally forming it, but it, at least in the finished product, that sense is very, very clear.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so when you're writing now, what is your process of writing? Do you think about things that have happened to you in your life, and if they just keep coming up, you decide to write a story about it, or do you sit down and intentionally walk through your memories and try to select them? How do you begin each of these stories?
It's usually something sparks something off, and it might be something quite small. I don't write anything down or take anything notes. Things stew in my brain for a bit. And this is going to sound completely autistic and retarded, but hear me out. So I have, before I start, I have like a couple key scenes or a key phrase or something. I think of them sort of as ink blots, like a Rorschach, and I'll stew on it for a little bit, and they'll sort of grow a bit and sort of head towards each other. But when I start writing, the ink blots aren't connected yet, and then I start writing and make it work. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I can see that. I find that's quite a common answer I get to these sorts of questions, that people will have a particular scene or some particular moment, oftentimes quite late, if it's a novel in the book, and then they're basically trying to reconstruct all of the events that lead up to this one event or a handful of scenes that they've already come up with. Yeah. Yeah,
maybe it is a common thing. Yeah,
I can see that. It's also interesting that backwards looking, or that steering on memory, because it can go in oftentimes one of two directions, because you can often get paralyzed if you get too backwards looking and living in the past and become completely static. But then some people find this real sense of generativity in looking back, particularly looking back regretfully. The regret is it's a strangely generative state, because you're dreaming of what could have been, which is imaginative. And I'm still not quite sure what it is that separates people out. Those who in looking back just get locked into place, and those who in looking back start dreaming up new worlds or creating things. Clearly you're the latter. I'm not sure if you have any thoughts about what separates those people, but I have noticed that memory really, really can affect people differently.
Yeah, I guess I think probably looking back on the book now, I think a sort of sense of survivor's guilt or even survivor's regret probably played a part. And that sort of burden of, I have to tell these people's stories because no one else will, and they'll be forgotten, and that will be that. And that actually bothered me quite a bit. And there were one or two people I thought, no, I'm not writing about you because I hope you are forgotten, you cunt. Like, there was a little bit of that too. But yeah, and I think it can be a push you forward. Yeah. At the same time, I think, like, for the more recent book, there were a bunch of stories we culled, or I culled, and then there was some my publisher culled. But a lot of the ones I culled, I realised I was basically rehashing this book, Remembering the Dead. And I thought, no, I'm getting stuck here, so move on and onto another thing. Yeah. So it can go either way. Yeah.
It's interesting that you're that sensitive to not treading similar territory in a different short story collection, because quite often, even with good short story writers, their collections can often just be treading the same ground over and over again. So it makes me really look forward to your next one, if you're consciously pushing away from Remembering the Dead. I do look forward to hearing or reading some stories about your so were you a kid in some sort of evangelical community or in an evangelical family?
Yeah, I was raised Jehovah's Witnesses. My parents were in there. I never really believed. I just got made to go, and it was about as much fun as having cancer.
What is that life like? Like, I've had Jehovah's Witnesses come to my front door, but beyond, and have them refuse blood products, which is a pain in the ass if someone's lost blood. But what is that? What does that sort of life entail? 'Cause I actually just know almost nothing.
A lot of misery. It really sucks the joy out of life. Obviously there's no birthdays, no Christmas, no friends from the outside world, and it really is intensely, what's the word? It just intensely sucks every bit of joy it can out of life. And you're just supposed to be zealous for God and everything the whole time, and you're not supposed to be a normal human and do normal human things. And what ends up happening is that most kids in an environment like that become very good sneaks and very good liars, myself included, and just sort of sneak around and get up to as much forbidden fun as they possibly can, and bide their time until they can get out, basically. And sort of that's what these stories coming up are about. Yeah.
It sounds like all kids, to an extent, kind of learn to do that around their parents, but it sounds like this is a sort of environment where that's just pushed to an extreme.
Much more intense. Yeah, much more intense. Yeah.
And so, do you live in communities of other Jehovah's Witnesses, or is it you're just with your family all the time?
Well, you have a congregation, and like, you're supposed to sort of not have much to do with people outside, so all the social activities and things tend to be with the other Jehovah's Witnesses, who are all immensely fucking boring people. And, what ends up happening is that there'll be, like, gatherings, barbecue or something, and the teenagers who are sneaking around will get together and go off and try and sneak around and do something fun. And not get caught. And it's just really, it is a really miserable existence for a kid. It really is. I'm
really looking forward to reading stories from it. I mean, I'm glad I don't have to live it, but I mean that's the great thing about fiction is you can experience it somewhat without having to actually put in the work of an entire childhood as a Jehovah's Witness. Yeah, because that's a world I just haven't had any meaningful contact with. I guess it's it's like you said earlier, as a writer, you can actually take these experiences that would otherwise be a waste of time and turn them into something good, or at least something
everything's
interesting.
raw material once you're a writer. Yeah, and it can and in a sense it's also a little bit therapeutic. Things can't hurt you as much if they're just raw material for stories. So it's I guess that's the bonus side of being a writer, I guess.
Yeah. Are there other things that you're feeling a creative pull from? So, remembering the dead, it a lot of it does seem to be you thinking about looking back on people you've known who have died or have wasted their lives or wasted time. Last Free Man, you were saying it's about, is it life on the Nullarbor?
Yeah. When I worked in the roadhouses and that.
Yeah. And then your upcoming collection on being part of the Jehovah's Witnesses as a kid. Are there other things that you're feeling a pull from that you think you'd want to write about? Because already those three things are pretty varied. Like that's a lot of ground to cover.
I've been toying with a few ideas. So I spent a big chunk of my 20s working as a bouncer around Adelaide doing security. So I thought I might be able to make something of that. It's given me, actually, as a result of that, I absolutely hate alcohol, hate being around it. Don't touch it. So there were some pretty hairy experiences, some good experiences, a lot of stupidity. So I think I might be able to make something out of that. I did work briefly as a prison officer in Alice Springs, and I have thought about I have thought about writing about that, but the problem is there's no way to write about it without sounding massively racist. So I don't think it would get accepted for a publisher. I don't know. There might be a way. I'm not sure. I don't know. I mean, there's now that I think about
those two things sound really interesting.
That's two books right there, maybe.
Yeah, Adelaide bouncer life, because I've spent quite a bit of time in Adelaide, so I can visualize that a bit better. Prison officer in Alice Springs is just way outside my experience, so that'd be really interesting.
Yeah, just got to find a way to do it without getting completely cancelled. I mean, I'm not really not cancelled, so we're sort of shut out of the mainstream as it is. So maybe it doesn't matter if I don't know.
How did you come to being a bouncer?
I do wonder if.
No, go on.
Sorry. How did I come into being a bouncer?
Yeah. I was wanting to ask because, I don't know if people are just listening, not watching. Like, you're built like a brick. I don't know how tall you are, but like, do you just get into it because you're bigger than most people and you could do it?
Back in the day, Centrelink used to send people to do courses, and they sort of divvied it up. Women and men who are a bit lightweight would get sent off to do the barista bartending course, and the blokes who are sort of a bit big would get sent off to do the security course. And Centrelink paid for it, and you got a job pretty much straight away. And there we, bouncing was really fun to start with. You bash a few idiots, you meet all these people, you pull roots like nobody's business. Like, it's out of control.
I think all the Americans listening probably won't even know what that means.
Okay, it's the easiest job in the world to pick up women. Like, it's just on toast, But after about 12 months, you become really sick of it, and it really grinds you down. Unfortunately, you find yourself getting stuck in it because you're on the outside of the mainstream world. Like, you work permanent night shift. You don't know how to relate because you're dealing with drunk fuckwits in pubs and nightclubs. talking to a straight person that works in an office or a shop or something is, you know what I mean? You struggle to communicate with normal people anymore. It's, yeah, and you kind of end up getting stuck in it because there's always work. Like having a security license will just keep you off the dole forever, but it doesn't pay that great anymore, and it's hard to make ends meet, and it's really soul destroying after a while, and you just get so sick of drunk people. Yeah, but you can pick up women; they're really easy. So there's that, you know.
Yeah, so probably not someone in their 40s or 50s. You'd get pretty sick of it.
It's fun when you're a young bloke. Do it for like a year when you're a young bloke and get out. But yeah, I kind of got stuck in it for a while. Yeah.
Yeah, I can see how you would come to just hate anyone who's drunk.
Yeah.
Because I guess it depends on what sort of drugs they're taking. Like if someone's on ice, they're aggressive. But yeah, as far as things go, alcohol does tend to bring out the aggression in people. So when you just get a barn full of people getting on the piss,
it's ugly. Hindley Street in Adelaide on like a Friday, Saturday night is just ugly. Yeah. And of course you have to be completely sober by law, like to do the job. So you're completely sober watching all this, dealing with it, and you're just like, why is alcohol even legal? Like seriously, like.
Is it boring just having to stand around sober all night, or are there enough people trying to pick fights with you or with someone else that you're at least?
You've got enough to deal with, and you know, you talk to people, and that it does grind you down after a while. Yeah, it really does, and you become very, very antisocial and anti-people.
Yeah.
Maybe there is a book in this. Yeah. It'd be quite bleak, I think.
There is at least a good few stories of the bouncer life, because you brought it up maybe once or twice in Remembering the Dead.
Yeah.
As among all of the various jobs you've had. Yeah, I can also see how it's like how kindergarten teachers start to talk to everyone as if they're 3-year-olds. Do you get that with living that bouncer lifestyle, that you start having a hard time knowing how to talk to someone at 9 a.m. when they're wearing nice clothes, completely sober?
Yeah. And you start, watching for threats and watching for violence all the time, and you're just like, no, these are just people in the shop. Like, chill the fuck out, you know. Like, it took me years to get over that. Still not entirely over it.
Yeah, I didn't even think about how much that must bleed into your day-to-day life. But I guess it must, especially if you're nicely screwing up your sleep cycle as well. You become a nocturnal creature. It's just getting screamed at by drunks all the time.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. So yeah, I'm thinking maybe there is a book in this. Yeah.
There's definitely a book in that. Was that better or worse than being a prison officer?
The prison officer, there's not that much violence in prison. That particular prison that I worked at, a lot of them are actually quite happy to be there. And prison sort of people there are just like, well, just do your time. A lot of them are repeat, so they're just institutionalised. They know the rules. They know what they can and can't get away with. So it's a lot more routine, a lot more boredom. Some of the, and this is where it would be difficult to write, because some of the absolute low IQs, it's not very PC to say this, but there is a very strong link between low IQ and crime. Some of the absolute mouth breathers that end up in prison cells, you're like, how are you walking upright, let alone committing crimes?
I mean, they keep getting caught, which I guess you can commit crimes if you're really dumb, but you're liable to get caught.
Yeah. Well, the smart ones are not in prison. Maybe, I don't know. The prison's more of a routine. Probably the worst thing about the Alice Springs prison was that it was in Alice Springs, which is pretty much the arsehole of Australia.
I have never heard anyone say anything good about Alice Springs. Like, I've never
And
been.
you never will.
It's like, yeah, exactly. I've never been, and I've never felt the need to go. I wouldn't be surprised if I get to the end of my life and I've never been to Alice.
You won't have missed anything. No, the reason I got the job up there, I couldn't get a job in a prison down in Adelaide because people in Adelaide stay, especially a government job like that, they just stay in it. Whereas up in the Northern Territory, no one stays. No one wants to live up there. And so you have all these, at the same time as that's happening, you've got all this government money pumped into the joint. So there's openings for all manner of things up there, but they can't fill bodies because no one wants to live up there, you know?
I had heard something similar. And then you mentioned this a few times in Remembering the Dead. Yeah, that strange characteristic of Alice Springs of just this constantly shifting population of people drifting up north, normally from the south.
Yeah.
And then trying to leave as soon as possible. You got it. You have a nice story in there about this guy who just wants to stay in Alice Springs because the money's okay, the life's okay, but his girlfriend really, really wants to get to Melbourne or Sydney. And that doesn't sound like an unusual dynamic. It sounds pretty
No,
common.
it's very normal. Yeah.
Yeah. Or maybe one person wanting to stay is the unusual thing. It's normally both. But I think there's definitely a book in both of those things. Or a book where you could like blending together those two things, because they're both security jobs. And talking about those differences, because I hadn't thought of that difference of the people in prison are more institutionalized, whereas the people in the wild are the ones who are more liable to try
the free range, free range
throw
lunatics,
a punch to bouncer and get laid out.
Maybe there is a.
You've definitely got books there. It's the advantage of you having worked so many different jobs. Each of those would be pretty interesting for people who've never done them.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
What about Nullarbor Life? So I think of these two books, of the two books you've written, I think it's when we were chatting about which book I should read for this, you mentioned that The Last Free Man has a bit more recognition, like more people have read it, and you're happier with Remembering the Dead. So more people might be aware of sort of what the Nullarbor Life is like from The Last Free Man. But what is it like? Is it lonely? Do you get that sense of isolation being in the middle of a gigantic desert?
So for non-Australians or anyone who hasn't been to the Nullarbor is this dead flat desert. There's just one highway running through it, and it's just sort of knee-high salt bush as far as the eye can see. And parts of it are so flat that you can actually put like a spirit level on the ground, and it'll be dead flat, for miles and miles.
For like Europeans to get a sense of the size, it'll be the size of Austria or bigger. It's so big.
No, like France, it's huge.
Huge.
Huge. And there's like an area the size of France, and it's got maybe 2,000 people living there, maybe. Probably 1,500. Like, it's just empty nothingness. And there's this highway, and sort of every sort of 150 kilometres or so, there's a roadhouse. And because there's no town, the staff live in like little cabins out the back behind the roadhouse. So, which is kind of the point of working there, because you get housed and fed by the boss. So you're still on minimum wage. It's not huge money, but because you don't have anywhere to spend it, no cost of living. You just pile it up. That's the theory. A lot of them just put their wages over the bar. So it's sort of quite a discount for the boss when you do that. So I sort of went out there because I was just sick of society, and it's the ideal place if you are sick of society, because there is no fucking society. There's people to drift through. There's a lot of misfits and oddballs end up there. A lot of functional alcoholics, not so functional alcoholics. People on the run from the law or various things, and there's of course backpackers, European backpackers and whatnot, things like that, and then of course all the traffic passing through east to west, it is. I had a ball. I spent 5 years out there and loved it, and one of the best things I ever did, to be honest. Yeah.
It is funny the parts of your life that you really seem to enjoy, the ones you really didn't enjoy. So there are obvious ones like, being on drugs. Not many people look back on that and say, yeah, perfect, really want to do it again. But it is funny hearing about the military hated it, living in just the middle of nowhere on the Nullarbor. Great, spent 5 years there.
yeah. I'm not a people person, no.
No, the Nullarbor is just about the best place in the world for that.
Oh, it is. Yeah.
So I just can't emphasize enough to people who haven't seen it. Like it's just nothing.
It's nothing. Yeah.
There's actually
Empty
just nothing there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Were you doing writing at that point, or was that before the point in your
that's
early
when I
30s?
started writing.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So because I went out there, sort of spat the dummy with society, and went out there, and started scribbling away. Yeah.
Was that pre-internet as well, or did you have the internet?
No. The internet. They had a little connection there. So sort of each roadhouse has like a phone and things, and it only goes for like 5k radius around the roadhouse, and then you've got another 150k's to the next roadhouse. So that's your tech out there.
Yeah. Do you feel actually that so now you're in a position where things are much more stable? Do you feel that you're more or less creative now that you're in a place of stability? Because you do have some people saying that they need tumult and unsettledness to be creative, whereas there are plenty of other people you come across who say, no, actually, I need stability to be able to create things. Do you feel like you're more creative now that things are settled and you can actually look back on these experiences?
Well, I'm more productive now. It's to write, you really need that settledness, I find anyway, to sort of sit down and discipline yourself and write. And if your life's a bit chaotic, that's hard to do. But in my writing, I'm mining all the chunks of my life that were chaotic. So maybe you need like 20 years of chaotic and then like 5 years of stability to write. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the way to do it.
I guess we'll see. If you have stability for long enough, maybe you'll start mining your stable life as well.
Yeah, it's possible. Stranger things have happened.
Yeah, it's good to hear, because you do hear sometimes people blackpilling on, you can never, you have to either choose between being creative or artistically generative or having a stable life, and you can't have the two of them. It's always nice to come across people who say, no, it's good to have stability.
It is, yeah. I think though you do need a little bit of adventure in your life.
Yeah.
To start with, to get you some raw material and whatever, but to actually discipline yourself and do the writing, you do need a bit of stability.
Yeah, that might explain why a lot. So this might just be a taste thing, but why at least I find a lot of modern fiction to be pretty boring. As in, I struggle to finish a lot of it. With the big caveat that it's only been in the past year or so that I've found a bunch of the internet retards that I come across write books that are actually really interesting, and I really enjoy reading those. So if you just look for weirdos self-publishing, or you've got a publisher, but small press publishing or self-publishing on Amazon, there are some real gems in the rough. But for the most part, modern fiction leaves me pretty cold, and I wonder how much of that is because it's institutionalized. So you have people sort of straight from high school to creative writing at uni, where you haven't had that much life experience. I say this as someone who's writing, and I had a middle class upbringing, but say because of work, I've seen a bunch of people die, and that I do feel like there is some creative tension there.
Yeah. But I totally like a lot of the stuff that wins awards and gets, in the, what's it called, the Australian Book Review. a lot of that sort of stuff. It just I get the same thing. It just leaves me cold. Yeah, it seems to me like they go from sort of high school, middle class upbringing, high school, they go to university to do creative writing or whatever, and they're probably in that university they're with a bunch of other middle class people. Maybe they live in a share house or something with some other students. That's all. Also, it just doesn't seem wide enough to me. Like you've never met anyone outside that bubble. You've never had experiences outside that bubble. And I'm not saying that bubble's a bad thing. I mean, in some ways, I'd like to live that sort of life. But if you're going to write, you do need raw material from somewhere. And I just don't think that's enough. And I think what ends up happening is you remember the line, I think it was Bukowski said it, those without passion resort to form. You get people that do novels that really go up their own arsehole with form and try new things with form, but there's no oomph there. Or you get people that pick the topical issue of the day, you know, Indigenous issues, women's issues, whatever, and they go for that. But again, there's no oomph, there's no, you know what I mean? And that's just my opinion, just standing on the outside looking in, but that's what it looks like to me. I think literature was better when you got a bunch of self-educated desperado types doing it. I mean, Hemingway was in 3 wars for fuck's sake, and he got a book out of each of them. You know, Jack London went sailing around the world and up to Alaska and that. You know, I think books were better when people had adventures and travelled and knocked about a bit. Yeah.
Yeah, there are a lot of things there. It's interesting you saying that they resort to form. So I guess maybe I'm just autistic enough where if the form is really interesting and well done, I'm actually quite happy for just nothing to happen in the book. But unfortunately, a lot of the form...
That infuriates me.
It feels like writing group form. Or it's like, that's just what I call it in my head, where you feel people writing very defensively, so they won't use any sort of interesting language. It's always very short sentences, quite glassy, no sense of place. A lot of the form I find
they're going to do it in the circle, and
a lot of the form I find very boring because it feels like it's written to minimize attack surface. Just give people as few things to attack. Whereas I like it when someone will do something just really out there. So again, David Foster Wallace, like he wrote in
coming back to him, don't we?
Yeah. He wasn't writing defensively. I like Thomas Pynchon a lot. He definitely doesn't write defensively. He seemed quite happy to write in a way that would probably piss you off. And it does. Like, it gets really annoying sometimes, and you just want him to shut up.
But I would argue you're better off pissing people off with your writing than playing it safe, and which seems to be perhaps a sort of built-in flaw with those like creative writing things. It's because you do that group thing where they all read and everyone critiques it. People, nobody enjoys getting critiqued and criticised much, do they? So people, like you say, that they write to give as little offence and attack space as possible, and then they end up writing not very much at all. You're probably better off. You're probably better off pissing a whole bunch of people off. Like I'm just trying to think who really winds people up. Like Bukowski. There are as many people passionately hate Bukowski and will write lengthy essays about how much they hate Bukowski, but there's also people that love him and will do the same. You know what I mean? And I don't think he gave a fuck. He just wrote what he wanted, and there you go. Yeah. So I think you're probably better off doing that, and haters be damned.
I wonder whether I do think there really is a role or a place for places where people can go to write, be taught about writing, to interact with other people writing. But I wonder whether it would be really beneficial to enter that sort of program when you're 40 or when you're 45. Because that both you've lived long enough to be a bit more confident in who you are and a bit more willing to be stubborn. So if you're doing something strange and other people don't like it, but you're kind of set in your ways enough that you'll just keep doing it and try to refine that, and you've probably lived a bit more.
Yeah.
I wonder whether it could be beneficial in that regard, and then whether writers in their 20s should just write stuff. So again, it's just because I brought it up earlier, but Mixtape Hyperborea, for example, I think that's a great young author's novel, because as far as I'm aware, Ryan Specs just wrote it because he wanted to. I don't know if he has any sort of formal training in writing. He just did it, and that feels like a great way for someone new to write things. Then maybe that process of formal refinement should come a lot later.
Yeah, and I really do. I think you need some life experience. You need to work a couple crappy jobs or knock about a bit, fall in and out of love. You know, I just think going from high school to uni and then expecting to write something publishable from there, I just think it doesn't sit right with me.
Yeah, I'm sure plenty of people have done it, but it does feel. Actually, it's more. I'd prefer a broader range of people writing, because there are plenty of people who've done the pipeline who seem, at least in the past, to have written well. But now that's almost the only writer you come across, or at least the only writer making a living off it. Yeah. And I just like a bit more variety. As far as things that could break through, so Remembering the Dead, I can easily imagine it's on bookshelves all over. It's a sort of thing that it's almost like it's 95% of the way there to being a good book club group. It's just a good book club book. It's just every now and then you'll call someone a cunt in it. And it feels like that might throw some of the book clubs. That's how you know it's a properly Australian book.
Trick.
Yeah.
The money's in getting it in high schools. No, well, I mean, it's very flattering of you to say so, but without harping on, the sort of literary establishment in Australia, it's very hard to break through. I've certainly had not much luck, but it's like I do a lot of my promotional marketing through Goodreads, quite active on there, and I'll approach people that I'm friends with on Goodreads. Hey, would you like a copy of my book? Give it a review, you know, and it's nearly always positive. Well, there's been the odd one not quite like it, but nearly always positive. But you know, you try and send it to some of the sort of institutional places like the Australian Book Review or Sydney Review of Books or something like that. Deafening silence. I don't know if I had a formula for breaking through to the big time, I wouldn't be sitting there. I don't know. Just do the best work you can and put it out there to as many people as you can. What are you going to do?
Yeah, at least with the internet, the dynamics have changed somewhat, where the problem is not so much being able to get a book published, because especially with Amazon KDP, it's actually trivially easy. The problem is, how do you get people to find your book or worthwhile books in the sea of just so much shit? I'm a big fan of Amazon publishing. I think it's great that people can get stuff out there, but there is no quality control.
None whatsoever. No.
And how do you tell the difference between a book that only has 3 reviews or three ratings and no reviews, but is really good, and a book that is just absolute shit with 3 bot reviews or something like that? It's really hard, and there's not really an answer to that quite yet. I mean, I guess to an extent the podcast scene can go some of the way there, but this doesn't scale. Like I need to read a book, which just limits the amount of time and the number of people I can get on. But anyway, I'm glad you're still plugging away at it. It's it's a special form of mental illness wanting to write books, because chances are you're going to get absolutely nowhere with it. It takes a lot of time and effort. But there is something very special about having a group of people who, despite knowing that, just keep writing stuff and keep putting things out there.
Yeah, it's one of those things you do because you're passionate about it. I think if your goal is to get rich and famous, there are far easier ways of doing it than this. I mean, fucking some of these auto-tune rappers or even porn stars make more money than writers, you know, like, and are more famous in most cases. So I think writing something you do because you're really passionate, you have a story or stories that you must get out. I don't see any other reason for doing it in this current climate.
Yeah. No, I can't. I can't really either. It's if you feel that urge. Unfortunately, the urge that I felt wasn't in something more lucrative, like being a SoundCloud rapper, or I don't know, getting into basketball.
Yeah. Well, I tried being a rock star first, but I have no talent. Yeah.
Oh yeah, what do you play?
Oh, I didn't. When I was young, I used to mess around. This is like the 90s, and everyone thought they could be a rock star, you know? Like, you're probably not old enough to remember Recovery, the TV show on the ABC?
No.
It used to be on a Saturday morning. It used to have bands live and things, and a lot of the Australian bands that were big then, you know, Grinspoon, Jebediah, all that sort of thing. And kids, myself included, would see it and go, well, they're just scruffy white boys with guitars. I'm a scruffy white boy with a guitar. How hard can it possibly be? But yeah, it does actually require some talent.
So do you know when your next book's coming out? If you want to shill it here. If you want to shill it when it comes out, you can come back on the show and I'll give it a read and talk to you about it. But
For sure. Sometime this year, it is apparently being formatted as we speak. The working title is The Everlasting and Other Stories. There's sort of, you may have noticed I do sort of trios of stories, like the 3 army stories and the 3 Remembering the Dead stories. So the core of this new book is a sort of trilogy of stories about growing up Jehovah's Witness. One of those stories is quite long. It's almost a novella, almost. And there's some other stories about some other things, and a lot of stories about South Australia, regional South Australia, things like that. Yeah. So hopefully in the next few months.
That'll be good fun, because I know South Australia a lot better than I know like Alice Springs or WA. So that'll be nice to have something closer to home. Have to get you to Victoria eventually, so you can write something about the state I know, the absolute best. We can get you in to live in the inner north of Melbourne, a place that you'll really enjoy.
I was actually born there, believe it or not.
Really?
Yeah, my parents lived there. This was 1980s. My dad was working in I think a tyre factory in Footscray.
Oh, right.
We actually looked up the address on my birth certificate, and it's like a multi-million-dollar property now.
I was going to say it's probably been turned into an apartment block with like untreated brick walls in the interior.
Yeah,
a lot of glass and metal.
It's Melbourne. You know, the old working class of areas are long gone, I think. But
depends what you mean. It's in spirit they're long gone. In form they're still there and cost $2.5 million for a tiny shoebox, shitbox. But anyway, so for listeners, Remembering the Dead and Other Stories by Lewis Woolston. Really, really recommend it. The link will be in the description if you want to pick it up on. Is it best to get it from Amazon? Is there another place where it's better for people to buy it from?
It probably works out better for me if they buy it from the publisher, Truth Serum Press.
Yeah.
But look, I'll take every sale I can get. If Amazon's easy for you, do that. You know.
Yeah. I'll put links to both those things in the description.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to shout out? Anyone else you want to shout out? You've been enjoying reading? Anything you want to shill?
Oh, I read David Herod's thing in Providence just recently. That was really
Providence
good.
is great.
I recommend that. Yeah, I really liked it. Yeah. I have is it Arbogast? I think that's how you pronounce his name.
I don't know how
I
you
have
pronounce his
the
name.
yeah.
Yeah.
Living Hypnotic Death. I haven't started it yet though. I will do. It's in my pile. So
I've got the same book in my pile as well. Arrived fairly recently.
notes.
Yeah, I look forward to that one.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, but any of your works? Well, I guess you've got one other. Yeah, so Last Free Man as well.
Yeah.
People really like Remembering the Dead.
And I had one for those who follow Minimag. He recently did a physical edition. Issue number 126, I think, is available on Amazon, and it's got one of my stories in it that is not in either of the books. So, yeah, if you're interested in that, I guess.
Oh, nice. Yeah, pick that one up. I'll make a note to myself too.
Yeah.
Was it 127?
126, yeah, Minimag.
126.
It's the only one I think he's done a physical edition of.
Yeah, so I'll put that in the show notes as well.
Sweet.
Right? Yeah. Thanks very, very much for coming on. Thanks for coming on Australia Day morning as well. I just completely forgot that it was the 26th. I should let you get to work getting blackout drunk at your local RSL.
That's it, yeah.
Yeah.
And just, racially abuse a taxi driver. That's Australia Day tradition.
Absolutely.
Wouldn't be Australia Day without it.
Come home to a very proud wife.
Yeah, fucking A.
Yeah. Thanks very much for coming on. Open invitation to come back on when you publish something new.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. It's been cool.
No worries. And for everyone listening, see you next time.
See you next time. All right, do I